skies are blue, clouds are white, and bright blessed days, and dark sacred nights. What a wonderful world.
Norfolk, Virginia, 1952, January 28th. My dad's name was Lowry, and he was a card shark. My mother was, full-time mom, and then became a school teacher. My mother's name was Narcissus, and my dad's name was Lowry. But she got divorced when I was 5 and married Leonard Henley, a sailor. Vagabond existence, like the great Santini. I moved from the age of 5 to 15, we moved 10 times. So I lived all over the country. 1 year, one place, 1 year, another place. So kind of that vagabond existence that you live as a Navy family. And coming from Norfolk, my mother and my grandmother used to tell me stories about how in Norfolk, in their day, everything they had was their own. They didn't have to go into the white part of Norfolk for anything. And my grandfather owned a general store, which he lost during the Depression. Had there been no Depression, I don't know. Who knows? I might have been like the Black Macy's, who knows? But she was very proud, and my grandmother was very proud of the fact that they had their own stuff. They had their own stores. She said we had our own, Highline stores, and then our own drug stores, our own doctors in Norfolk back in the day. And we didn't have to ask them for anything. We didn't have to go downtown and be humiliated, And so they drilled that in me when I was young. And the manifestation I saw of that was the Black Muslims. Now, I didn't believe about Mr. Yaqub and the mothership and all that. But what I liked was the, doing for self, and the fact that they were, I didn't know this word then, but they were vertically integrated. You can say what you want about the messenger, but let me tell you something. That was a man who knew how to run a business, a multi-billion-dollar business. everything they did for themselves. But I was a black nationalist. I mean, that was what was in my soul, you know, black pride. That was a big thing with me.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I'm Lynette Henley, Greg's sister, younger sister, and I get to be your MC today. I'm supposed to tell you some story about Greg, but there's too many to tell. But I just want you to think of all of you that have met Greg as a Renaissance man. He loved everything. He was curious about everything, and he imparted that to all of us, older and younger, anyone he met. As he used to say, I love the sound of my voice most of all. And those of you that know Greg knows he would love to talk and tell stories, a storyteller from a young age. I have so many memories of Greg. Greg was 5 years older than I was. And in our family, because we were military, we were very close-knit. So as Greg said, we moved all the time, and my mom would say, you don't need any friends, you got each other. Those are your friends. And so Greg taught me so many things, that girls could do math. He taught me how to play chess at like third grade, first or second grade. And he loved learning, always. We always had a set of encyclopedias that he read through all the times. And so moving around the country and meeting all kinds of people, I would say prepared us and prepared Greg to meet all kinds of people and reach out to all kinds of people and share his love and wealth of knowledge, humanitarianship, mentorship, and love of life. Greg did it all. He did it as often as he could. If he's found a new endeavor, he'd want to tell you about it. He'd call you and say, guess what? I found this. You need to read about this. You need to see this. And so today, I hope that we get to share some of our family, his friends, his associates, his love of life through today. And before we go further, I want to thank Melvin McRae for getting us here and Jody for putting this together, because we said, how do we tell Greg's story? How do we do that? And this is a great opportunity for us to do that.
I didn't really experience racism in the South too much because we moved when I was 5 or 6 years old the first time and started moving. We bounced around the country, primarily in the North. I did experience it 1 year when I integrated a school in Charleston, South Carolina. Scary, to tell you the truth. We had death threats, and the FBI was protecting us. You know, it got a little crazy because, you know, it was a Navy base in the South, and we were in Navy housing in the South, so they couldn't exactly let the Klan kill us. That wouldn't have been good form. We had moved to California by the time I was 15, and that sort of became my permanent home. A little town called Vallejo, which is 20 miles north of San Francisco, near Napa. That's where I went to high school. Now, the high school was a blue-collar high school, Vallejo High. It was, I would say, roughly 60% white, but blue-collar, as blue-collar as you can get. I'm trying to give you a sense of the mix. It was at least half white and almost an equal amount of blacks, and then other. And it was all blue-collar. In fact, in my graduating class of 600, only five kids went to college. All of them went to work. Yeah, at Mare Island. I mean, the jobs were plentiful. You didn't even have to graduate from high school, and you could get a job at Mare Island, the Navy base, make enough money to buy a house and get a car. So why study for college? You know, listen, I was always sort of, you know, one of those kids who ran for every office and got good grades and blah, blah, blah. But a guy identified me, a Princeton graduate, identified me when I was a sophomore. And I was the first black member of the Key Club, which was the most prestigious club on campus. It was the high school equivalent of the Kiwanis on campus. And he approached me, I was the first black member, and this white guy, he's from Arkansas, in fact, Pine Bluff, Dr. Lonsdale. He approached me when I was a sophomore, when they admitted me, and he said, you know, you're so articulate and smart, and I want you to go to Princeton. I humored him. I said, okay, sure. What I planned to do was go to Stanford because my sister was at Stanford. And, you know, when you're in California in those days, that's just what, if you were one of those top students, you just went to Stanford. So I got accepted and to Stanford and really still planned to go to Stanford, except I went to orientation and my sister was going into her senior year, and I envisioned at least 1 year of her running my life. So I came back from Stanford's orientation and said, I'm going to Princeton.
So I'm bringing up Amanda Walker, who grew up with us in Vallejo. She is actually Debbie, our older sister's best friend. So it was Debbie, Amanda, and Greg. And so Amanda, please come and share some of our Vallejo stories with our friends today.
This is an excellent day for us to celebrate the life of Gregory Allen Howard. I met Gregory on a yellow school bus. We were headed from a segregated enclave in the northernmost section of the city. We were on our way to Vallejo High School, and it was a school that wasn't a whole lot different from the one that Greg portrayed in Remember the Titans. When Greg and Debbie set foot on that bus, my soul just cried out, hallelujah. For the first time, I would not be the only nerd on the bus. The city leaders and the society in general around us, they tried to relegate us to certain boundaries, where we could live and what we could become in life. Greg refused to accept those boundaries. He would not let any man hinder him. Greg excelled in almost everything that he touched. He was president of his class. He was vice president of the student body. He was a National Merit Scholar. He was a student editor at the Vallejo Times-Herald, which was something pretty extraordinary in that day. He was a wrestler, and he was highly ranked as a football player. A few years after high school graduation, I was strolling through the campus of Berkeley Law School, and I heard a voice call out my name. I turned to see a smile so bright that it put the sun to shame. Over coffee, Greg and I reminisced about where we had come from and where we were going. Greg was struggling at that time. He was telemarketing by day and writing screenplays at night. But that man had absolutely no fear, no doubt as to where he was going to be in a few years. He knew that he had success stamped on his forehead. Fast forward a few years, and Greg's breakthrough in Hollywood made the doubters, including me, bow down. His name has appeared on the big screen next to the name of some of the biggest stars in the industry. But the true beauty of Greg Howard is that he never changed, whether he was working in high places or toiling in the field. Greg remained humble. I approached Greg about speaking at a Black screenwriters event, and to my surprise, he accepted. It was also my relief because I had told all these people that he was my friend. So I couldn't back down at that point. He didn't ask for an honorarium. He didn't ask me to send him a limo to pick him up. All that I had to offer Greg was a store-bought piece of cake, and he accepted it like it was a crest. With quiet shrewdness, Greg bogarted his way into a seat at the Hollywood table. More importantly, Greg became a role model to African American youth. He worked with the kids at the Boys and Girls Club of Vallejo. Now, this man who had made it, he reached back as his success train was leaving the station. He didn't just lecture the kids, he provided them scholarships. He put his money where his mouth was. He inspired those children from our neighborhood to crush boundaries just like him. Now, I miss my friend. When his smile filled the screen at the Academy Awards ceremony, I cried as if it was unexpected. But why shouldn't this man, this brilliant man who had brought us so many gifts, why should he not be honored by his peers? He brought us stories rooted in Black history. He gave us stories that uplifted the human condition. And our gift to Greg must be that we must be relentless in making sure that that Black history continues to be told, that the true stories about our history come out. To Greg's sister Lynette, to his brother Michael, and to his other loved ones and friends gathered here today, I say be encouraged by his rich legacy. Be encouraged that Greg now sits at the table of our Lord and Savior, that he is enchanting his mother, whose face I can see right now, his father, and the kingdom with his timeless stories. May God bless Gregory Allen Howard and keep his soul in perfect peace.
When I was accepted, they said, send in a picture, with your name and, where you're from. And I said, I'm going to such a fancy place. I think I'm going to call myself Gregory Allen Howard the First. So if you look in the Freshman Herald, you'll see Gregory Allen Howard the First. I'm the first and the last. I wanted to fancy myself up for Old Nassau. The first. And they printed it.
Greg had jokes, as we can see. So I have the privilege of bringing up, our family was a three-pronged stool. Henleys, Howards, and Coles. And so I'm going to bring the Howard family up, the Howard clan, because it's a bunch of us. Bill's going to speak first, and any of the other Howards that would like to speak now, please join him on stage.
Hi, my name is Bill Howard, and I'm Greg's first cousin. Greg, first and foremost, was family. His dad and my dad were brothers. Those are my brothers down there. That's James and David, my cousin Steve, my cousins Shirley, Marilyn. You can tell because we all look just alike, We come from a large family on Greg's dad's side, But Greg had many families, which is why we're here today. He had his mom, Aunt Narcissus, two dads, Uncle Lowry and Uncle Leonard, his sisters, Deborah Camille, Lynette, brothers, Ricky and Michael, nieces, nephews, and a host of cousins. He also had his Vallejo family, his Princeton family, his writing family, his professional family, his politically active, intellectually stimulating family. Many of those families crossed over into one another. I can speak to Greg's generosity and love for all of his families. Each of us can attest to the zest and joy that Greg brought to life and to others. But I want to share with you a personal side of Greg that most don't know, though Greg both spoke of it and alluded to it. Greg was a Howard. He did not rise from the ashes like a phoenix. No, he was born and raised from good stock. Greg mentioned in conversations and interviews that he came from a family of academics. Greg's grandfather, my grandfather, James Paul Howard, was born in 1878 in Union Point, Georgia, of the union of two former slaves. Gramps was the seventh of 8 children. For some reason, lost to history, his parents invested a lot of time and resources in him. Gramps became a learned man. I can't speak to his credentials, but he was fluent in Latin and Greek. He taught school and was a principal in many small towns in Georgia. Gramps, James Howard, and Annie Carithers married and had 6 children. The first, Camilla Howard, was born in 1906, and the last, William Howard, was born in 1921. All 6 children went to college. 5 graduated. The first, Camilla, graduated from Spelman in 1927. The last, William, graduated from West Virginia State in 1948. 4 of the 5 got graduate degrees. One was the first Black Fulbright scholar, obtaining his master's from the University of Glasgow in Scotland and his PhD from the University of The Hague in the Netherlands in political science. 2 went on to chair departments in languages at Spelman and political science at Florida A&M. 1 became an associate dean at the Michigan State University College of Osteopathic Medicine. All 3 were tenured full professors. I share this with you because, yes, I am proud of my forebears, but also to let you know that Greg strived, excelled, and achieved because he knew no other way. He too lived in the shadows of his predecessors and always wanted to live up to and make them proud. Finally, and I can't speak about Greg without stating unequivocally that Greg loved his family. He was fiercely proud and protective of his siblings, his nieces, and nephews. Anyone who has known Greg over the years has heard countless stories of Robin and Ziggy. His joy in them was boundless. Greg's greatest legacy was the love of the people he left behind. We love you and we miss you, cuz.
Good morning, everyone, especially our beloved family. My name is Marilyn Evans. I'm known as Miss M. Miss M stands not only for Marilyn, but for manners. And Greg's aunt, Camilla Howard, my cousin at Spelman, when we would drive from Detroit, that long, then it was 16 hours, drive with a shoebox of food, we would get to her house and we immediately perked up, sat up straight, held a teacup, listened to her. She was an influence on us. As a result, I started a charm school in Detroit. I'm an educator by profession, and I saw the need in the classrooms for more politeness, more manners, more confidence. And that's how I remember Greg. We had a reception for him at your Heritage House, an old Victorian museum in Detroit. The lady in charge of it, Mrs. Love, was one of Camilla's students. And when she found out this was a Howard, she said, oh, whatever you want. I started my charm school there. I had the reception for Greg there. And Greg was so humble, and we had so many people there. It was a basic reception where you make the sandwiches, somebody will order this, we can afford that, and we can do that. Greg loved it. And I just remember the smile on his face. So now, still remember that smile on his face because Greg is now an ancestor. And one of the things that I truly believe in our family, the Howard Evans Carithers line, is that we honor and respect our ancestors. We use their energy and all of their aspirations to push us. I moved to the land of my ancestors, back to Atlanta about 15 years ago, after spending over 50 years plus in Detroit. So I'm there with the ancestors. I push it. I go out in the morning. I go out near the woods, and I pour libations in the name of the ancestors, the Evans, the Carithers. Now Gregory's name will come up. So I am so proud to say that Gregory is an ancestor. He will be with us forever and ever. He will continue to inspire, to lead, to push. And to the young cousins, the Howard cousins coming up, just know that whatever you want to do, always say, all is well, I can do it because Greg did it. If he could move 10 times and still do what he had to do, and this last little tidbit, he came to Detroit to be with James Paul Howard and the Howards, the young men that you met a few minutes ago. And they got him a job at Ford Motor Company in the factory. So that was a humbling experience. It was so hot there in the city during the day, and he worked on the line, and it kept him humbled, just the way he is as you know him today. So again, I say, I salute Gregory Allen Howard, our beloved cousin, our ancestor. So his name will be called in our hearts and in our minds. Thank you so much.
All the black students, they made sure they all had black roommates. All 125, except me. Now, to this day, I still don't understand why I was left out. They put me in a suite with one of those big suites, I think it was Gauss or something like that, put me in a suite with like 18 white guys. And I mean, I was already weirded out by the school, and then you put me in a suite with 18 white guys, and everybody black had a black roommate, so they had an instant friend, and I'm all alone. So I went to, what was it, Fleming, Master Fleming. He's master at Wilson College. And I told Fleming, I said, you know, this isn't going to work for me. I said, you know, you got to find me a black roommate. And they said, there are none. They're all paired up. So he gave me a single. So it actually worked out quite well because I was the only freshman, black or white, who had a single. And in those days, that was like being rich.
Only Greg. So I'm going to have our cousin Pierre come up now, and right after that, I'm not sure if I'm off sequence or not. Where's Jody? Are we okay? All right.
Hello, everyone. I am Pierre Gatling. I'm coming from the Cole side of the family. I didn't prepare a big speech today. It's been, with Greg being gone, it's been very challenging for me. Greg was like my big brother that I never had. Greg was like my big brother that I never had. We probably talked 3 or 4 times a week. Either I would call him at 6 a.m. in the morning or he would call me. And he asked me one day, he said, well, why do you get up so early in the morning? And I said, Greg, don't you know that our Uncle Joffrey, you know, when he worked at the Naval Shipyard, he would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, he would prepare breakfast, and then he would get to work at 6 a.m. And being that I was the kid that always liked to eat, I would get up early in the morning so I can get breakfast. And my Uncle Joffrey would always say, he said, you know, there's only one other person that eats like you. And I said, who? He says, Greg. I said, well, I never met Greg. He said, you'll meet him, but I can't have you guys here at the same time because you eat too much. And I kind of just laughed. I didn't think much of it. So as time went on, my family, we moved to California, and I've lived in Los Angeles most of my life. And Greg was living up in Vallejo, but we never connected. So my Aunt Inez, my late Aunt Inez, which is Greg's aunt, he says, you and Greg need to connect. So why don't you reach out to Aunt Tissy, get his number, and you guys can get together because you're a talent agent, and he's a writer, so you guys will be good for one another. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And I said, well, what makes you think that we'll get along? It's been so much time in between. She says, well, you still like to eat and he likes to eat, so just, pick a good restaurant and you guys will do just fine. So that's exactly what happened. Greg, for me, is a very inspiring person. I have several friends that had children who had aspirations of going to elite colleges. And Greg, of course, as everyone knows, he mentored young kids. So several of my friends that had children, he would take time out of his day, lecture them and tell them what they need to do. And then, of course, he would deliver on his part. He never wanted anything in return. He was very passionate about helping people. And I'm very grateful because I've learned things from him. And then, of course, from a business standpoint, I would hear everything from his frustrations with his scripts. If he had a pitch meeting, he would tell me how it will go. I hate those people. I said, just let it go. When we were going to the premiere for Harriet, we were sitting in the car, and he was kind of quiet. I said, aren't you excited? He said, yeah, well, hopefully, people will like the movie. So we got to the premiere, we enjoyed the film, and then as we're driving back, I said, well, what did you think? He said, relief. And I said, well, usually you don't get stressed out too much. He said, yeah, but I was just kind of nervous. I said, well, we all are. We all, want excellence. And, one thing about Greg, as you guys all know, he's when I say strive for excellence, I mean, when he wrote his scripts, he was hoping that, well, maybe it might get nominated for an award, maybe an Oscar. That was always his goal. There would be times when producers would approach him about certain projects, and if he didn't like it, he would just tell them no, and would tell them why. And I said, why would you turn down the project? Well, I don't care about the money. If I can't win an Oscar off of it, I don't want to do it. Okay, I said, well, that makes sense then. So for me, I've learned so much because, on my mom's side of it, I come from the coal side, we have a lot of educators, but one thing, we never settle for mediocrity. And Greg Howard, he took a lot of pride in that. He says, I'd rather not do it. And one of the things that really impressed me about him, we were having a conversation with him, and he said, where's your father from? I said, I guarantee you, if I told you where my father's from in North Carolina, you've never heard of the town. So I told him, I said, my father's from Ahoskie. And Mr. Wikipedia himself told me the whole history of Ahoskie. That's why I used to call him Wikipedia, because whenever I needed an answer, he would give it to me. I said, what do you know about Ahoskie? He says, well, back during slavery, it was the one town where they had interracial marriages. So, you may want to talk to your ancestors. I said, I know, and see if you're related to any of them, because, you have some Caucasian in your family. I said, I'm pretty sure that I do, but he knew more about my family than I did. And with Greg, you could never challenge him when it came to history. If you have an opinion about something, well, I'm a history major. I know, trust me. So of course you look it up and that's okay, you were right about this one. But he loved to, as Lynette mentioned, he loved to share new ideas. He called me up one morning and said, I got this real new energy drink for you. I said, what is it? Because I like to work out early in the morning. It's wasp juice. I said, wait a minute, what are you talking about, wasp juice? Where did you get that from? Is that some Princeton philosophy? He said, no. He said, I just started taking it. I said, well, what does it do for you? He said, well, it gives you a lot of energy. And I said, okay. I said, well, I will leave that to you. But Greg always, whenever he had an idea, he would call me, or there's something that's good for your health. He was great. He had great ideas, great answers. Back in the middle of December of last year, while he was in the hospital, I was supposed to go out and visit him. And I said, Greg, I'm gonna hold off because I've been coughing a lot. I said, my lungs are inflamed. And he said, I got the perfect solution for you. Go to the store and get some turmeric, and you'll be feeling better within 24 hours. I said, turmeric. So I go to the store and buy some turmeric. 24 hours later, the coughing's gone. And he said, see, I told you. He said, I have that issue myself. But, we're all going to miss Greg because, he's very inspiring. And, for myself and those that loved him, I'm just going to miss his booming voice every day. Yes, he lived in Florida. We didn't see each other much, but we talked every day. And like I said, he's the brother that I never had. And I just want to, let him know and everybody, I love you. We'll see each other again soon. And it's, hey, keep looking down on us.
Thank you.
I call it, in one sense, the golden age, because it really was. Golden age of black students at Princeton, because there were so many of us relative to the population, and it was great. Well, listen, this is, the early 70s. The zeitgeist of the time was, militancy and black power and self-determination.
You are revolutionaries.
The white radical movement, of course, is going on, but for us, there was a lot of, black nationalism and that, and that sort of thing. And it's odd that I would come to a place like Princeton to study black history, but I did, and got it every day because I minored in that. You felt like you were on fire on a daily basis. There was so much going on. Every discussion at a dinner table or every time you got together to talk, it was all this intensely political and black nationalistic talk. And there were these factions and groups on campus, the Black Panthers, and a little bit anyway, but then the Black Muslims and the Black nationalists. There's just all this debate going on all the time, and it was a magical time. It really was. The upperclassmen, these were some hardball intellectuals, and even the ones who came before us, Jerry Horn, sort of set the table, and you could engage them, and no one was bored. We were all engaged, and we were all trying to figure out who we are as a people, where we're going as a people, coming into the full grips of the depth of racism that was in America. I got an A in colonial history, and the experience was so rich and wonderful, I decided to major in history. And it was weird because I didn't know what I was going to major in anything. I just took it as a lark. But the professor, Frank Craven, who was the preeminent colonial American historian in the country at that time, he made it so vivid and exciting. And he was old as dirt, but he used to lecture without notes and talk about those founders like they were his friends. And it just turned me on. And I said, I'm majoring in history. And then in precept, we get into it because again, I got an afro and I'm a militant. I don't know what his politics were. I assume he was a conservative white guy from, old man from North Carolina, but as long as you could prove your point, it was fine with him. Mr. Howard, now what do you think about this? And so we go back and forth, but I loved him and I got an A. And that's when I decided I was gonna major in history. So academically, I still don't feel like I did any work because when I was taking a history course, it was fun. I never felt it was work at all.
I'm going to bring up the Princeton crew, but 3 of us were history majors in our family. Greg, me, and my brother Ricky that just passed, for very different reasons. But Greg inspired us about the storytelling of history, and I think that inspired us to go into history. So I first want to This man needs a round of applause on his own, and that's Melvin McCrae. These film clips are from him. We also have Thurman White, Rick Hyde, and John Barfield, but any of the Princeton crew that's here that would like to come up, please join us on stage.
Wow, this is amazing. I really do feel like Greg is in the house with us today. You know, it's funny, you meet someone and you find out that there's all these connecting circles, and I often wondered why and how, what it all meant. I'm still trying to figure that out. But Greg and I were both born in Norfolk, Virginia in 1952. He in January and I in July. And both our fathers, Greg's father, Leonard Henley, was in the Navy. My father was a merchant seaman. And I think he mentioned that his father, Lowry Howard, was a card shark. And I think my father believed that he was a card shark too. He would play cards with people on the ship, but he would make sure he didn't win right away because nobody would play with him. So we both left Norfolk at age 5. And I went to New York, and Greg went to various parts of the country and ended up in Vallejo, California. And we ended up in Princeton. And it's just, these circles just keep intertwining. And at Princeton, Greg was involved with a bunch of us in a movement to start a Black House. And he actually participated in a group of black students who went to Bob Goheen, the president of the university, en masse to his house to demand a Black House. And Greg was scared to death. He was a freshman, fall of 1970. He thought he was going to get kicked out, but he went anyway. And actually, they were received very cordially. But he came to me in about 2015 and he said, listen, we need to chronicle the early pioneers of black students at Princeton, and we need to let people know how this Black House, called the Third World Center, came to be. And he said, I want you to do a documentary on it. So I interviewed him in 2015, and much of the material that you see came from that interview. After talking to him about the Black House, I sort of chatted with him for a couple of hours, and we talked about everything. And the thing that he wanted to do, he just said, listen, we need to chronicle this history because we're getting older now. We don't know how long we're going to be around, and we need to get this down on for posterity, which I did. And I'm so glad I did because, of course, these circles are still intertwining. It brings me here today, and I get to share all of Greg's humor and intellect and character with you, and I think it's just a wonderful thing. The interesting thing I find is that with all of these interconnections, I get the feeling that we're not done with connecting with Greg, either here or in the hereafter, and it's a privilege to know him, and he certainly will be missed. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Thurman White, and I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we didn't have a particular order, but I guess they're letting age go before beauty. So I first met Greg Howard in 1970 when he was a freshman and I was a junior at Princeton. He's in a class of 1974. And I'm in a class of 1972, and there's several of my classmates that are back here, Rod Plummer, Preston Holmes. And so, as Greg was saying, this was an interesting time, a time of chaos, a time of community, a time of change in our country and on campus. And so we thought of ourselves as the vanguard. We thought of ourselves as the people who would change the world. And in many ways, we continue to dream that dream even today. Now, we spent so much time together. Most of the stories that I have about Greg, I cannot tell in polite company. Okay? I can't even change the names to protect the innocent. But it was a time of experimentation, okay? It was a time of a lot of things going on campus, but it was also a time when there's a cohort of black students at Princeton, first men, then women, that have formed this community. And we have remained friends and a community to this day. And so I so cherish this now over 50-year relationship with Greg. Now, over the years, I mean, we did so many things on campus, the things I can talk about. He taught me photography. We spent so much time printing black and white photos in the Princeton lab. We spent so much time studying black history and having those debates that he talked about. So much time sharing our potential dreams of who and what we could become and how we could impact the world to really change the arc of and quality of the lives of our people. So over the years, we continued to stay close together, and Greg was really a zealot, okay? You see him now as a very successful screenwriter and a presence in Hollywood, but listen, over the years, he was many things to many people, okay? I remember he was a stockbroker at one point. He was a radio sales manager at one point. He was, I think he even worked for a while for one of Percy Sutton's radio stations down here in LA. I mean, Greg would just, he would just do different things. But he always had the gift of gab. And in many ways, he never let the facts get in the way of a good story. And so Greg was a great storyteller. He was a griot. But one of the most interesting stories I have about Greg is around, 1996, 1997. I'm in the Bay Area and I'm reading Sports Illustrated, and they have an interesting story about Muhammad Ali visiting with Fidel Castro. And so I'm reading this story, and they show a couple of pictures, and all of a sudden, I look at one of these pictures and say, damn, that's Greg Howard standing there. And I called him later on and said, man, what are you doing in this picture with Muhammad Ali and Fidel Castro, two of the most iconic people of the 20th century? And he said, well, man, I'm doing this research to potentially write this script on Ali, and so I've just become part of his entourage. And of course, he told me all the things about Fidel and how captivated he was by Fidel. Of course, everyone loved the champ, but he also talked about two people who were in that group. One, his just great deep love and admiration for Bingham, which didn't surprise me because they both love photography, and also Lonnie. And so, but like I said, Greg was a zealot. He'd just show up. I said, honey, he just shows up in this picture with Fidel. And so, at any rate, I will miss Greg. I had a chance to talk to him when he was in the hospital at the end of December. I had a chance to pray with him. I hope that didn't send him on early to the glory. But I'll miss my friend. I'll miss our brother. His spirit will always be with us. And I just say rest in peace, rest in power, rest in paradise, and keep telling those stories.
I'm going to try to be brief. My name is Rick Hyde. I was the class of 1975 at Princeton, a year behind Greg. I flew in for Washington, D.C. because I loved this guy. I met him. I was a little younger when I went to Princeton. I remember it was 1971. I had skipped a grade, so it was very uncomfortable for me there. I couldn't figure out what was going on in this university. As Greg pointed out, I had a black roommate. His name was Mark Fortson from Canarsie. He was an engineering major, so he had gone to class. I I remember when I showed up, it was a 4-man suite. There were 2 fellows to the left and me and Mark to the right. And when I walked in, the 2 fellows to the left had a full Confederate flag hanging over their door. And this fellow was from Park Avenue, wasn't from the South, which told me the mindset of the people that were coming to Princeton. I wasn't accustomed to this. My mother grabbed me by the arm and said, "Don't you get in any fights." And I was like, "Mom, I just showed up here." Mark had gone to class. He was an engineering major. I think he had an 8 o'clock class. I was sort of lounging in my bed. I don't remember, it was maybe 9-ish, 8:30. My door bursts open. This giant guy comes in. "Hyde from DC, huh?" I looked at him like, "Wait a minute, are you gonna rob me?" What? At that point, I recognized him. He had been introduced to me earlier by the name of Saheed. And I remember him saying, "Hyde, get up. These folks have been running the world for 2 hours and you're laying in the bed." And that started my relationship with this gentleman. I had many other friends who are here. They were much more gentle in their approach to friendship than Greg happened to be. But I became a music and sports lawyer, and Greg and I developed a really close relationship over the years. He would call me sporadically. We would talk about all sorts of things. I remember one year, John and he created an environment where every Super Bowl, I think it was, we would have a conference call and just talk about anything and everything all through the game. He would call me, one of my good clients was Stevie Wonder, and we would talk about things that Steve did. I would see something, and he would call me and said, "Did Cynthia talk about me?" I said, "Well, yeah, a little bit, but it was all good." But he was a man who had his finger on the pulse of people, their circumstances. He had his finger on the pulse of my circumstances, and every conversation was truly blessed. And I'm really blessed to have known him, and I'm gonna miss him. And God bless you, Greg Howard. My daughter is over there, class of 2016 at Princeton. And I've shared stories with Elizabeth about all of these folks and what it was like when we were in school. Melvin has captured it eloquently in film. And I'm very fortunate to have known them all, and may he rest in power and peace. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Barfield. I hail from a little small town in southeastern Michigan called Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I'm full of emotion right now, as many of you are, because we all loved Greg Howard. I can feel the love in this room. When the family members got up and spoke, I felt the love emanating from them. And Greg came from a very powerful family. That's one of the things that I've realized today. He was one of my best friends in life. He was a dear, dear friend. I love Greg. And what an honor it is to be here with family and friends who loved him as well. He and I met 53 years ago. That's a long time ago. We were freshmen at Princeton, and I remember freshman week, we were part of a gathering. As you've heard from the others, we were sort of a new group of folk at Princeton at that time. The largest class of black students who had ever matriculated there. So we were very close. We're at a gathering freshman week, and this great big guy walks up to me, and, "What's your name?" I said, "What? What's your name?" I said, "My name is John Barfield." "What's your first name?" "John." "Okay, J." "You're gonna be JB." I said, "No, my name is John Barfield, not JB." "Well, change it then." He was a powerful, big guy. and his personality was even bigger than that. And we all remember Greg's infectious laugh. You could hear Greg coming 500, 700 feet away with that laugh of his. It just lit up every environment that he was in. But anyway, we became very dear friends, not only freshman year, but over the course of the 4 years. And as you've heard from the others, we were a new phenomenon at Princeton. We were so close, and we spent a lot of time together outside the classroom, getting to know the best of one another. And we rallied behind causes that we felt were important to embrace at Princeton, to welcome black students there, to pressure the university to divest of securities in South Africa. We felt that was very important. And as you heard Thurman, I think, say, we wanted a place to gather and love each other and party together. And Greg was very instrumental, along with Thurman and others, in creating a black house for Princeton's black students. We called it the Carl Field Center, but it was a place where we could gather, be ourselves, get to know the best of one another. And we had so much fun in that facility. And I thank Greg to this day for his leadership there. So the 4 years came and went so rapidly. All of you in this room, like I, grew up in our college years. And Greg and I don't think this is uncommon, we lost touch with one another. And later in life, we reconnected. And beginning about 20, 15 years ago, he'd call me out of the blue. Hey, JB, you got a minute? And I'd say, sure, Greg. And I was running a big company at that time, and no matter how busy I was, I stopped everything for Greg Howard. And I would call him. He was developing a screenwriting career and experienced great success and great frustration at times. And we would console one another. I was building a national company, and I would relish his advice on key initiatives that were important to me in the business. We were so close, and what was intended to be a 5-minute call would very commonly last an hour or two, because I just loved the guy. And that infectious laugh will live with us forever. I love Greg. I loved my time with him. And my good brother, I look forward to seeing you again. God love you.
Princeton played a huge role in my writing career because, again, I'm not doing anything too dissimilar to what I was doing when I was here. Researching history, historical topics, having a discussion with myself instead of someone else, and then writing about what I've read. I'm putting it in a dramatic context, I'm doing narrative, but as far as, like my current project is called Night Witches, and that's about the first and only female combat unit in the history of war. Russian female bombers. They're called the Night Witches. And these are teenage girls who bombed the Nazis in World War II. Bombed them at night. Teenagers. The oldest one was 21. Young girls. And see, they said, well, what's your connection to it? My connection to it is the most fascinating story. And I was in Moscow last year for 6 weeks, researching it, meeting the couple who were still alive. I'm just fascinated by that. And what's fascinating to me is I knew about the war on the Western Front because I wrote a World War II script. So it's almost like I'm taking a class now on the war on the Eastern Front. So now I get to take Russian history. And it's just the coolest thing because I spent so much time in my study, Carol. And that's when I fell in love with writing. I had a Carol mate who never showed up once. So that was my domain. And oddly enough, that's when I learned to write in cramped spaces. So whenever, I've owned a house, I've always picked the smallest room to write in because I'm used to writing in a small space. I said, if I could find somebody who would pay me to write, I'd be the luckiest person on earth. My goal was to write, and fortunately, it all turned out for me. I got to do exactly what I wanted to do. Didn't want to do anything else. Been tough, but,
Okay. So, we have, let me find my space on here. Okay, so Greg mentioned Night Witches, and we have President of Josephson Entertainment, Matt Geller. I saw Matt. There he is. Okay, who will come and speak with us now. Thank you, Matt.
Hi, everyone. As I was thinking what to write, I kept hearing Greg's gentle and soothing voice softly buzzing in my ear, saying, "Don't make it boring, Geller." About a decade ago, I met Greg in Sarah and Larry Guterman's home. I was trying to corner him to get the rights to a screenplay he had written. I think he knew I was full of hot air when I told him that I knew everyone in town, but he took a chance on me anyway. That was a pivotal moment and the start of an amazing friendship and professional collaboration. And as I would later learn, that was one of Greg's greatest gifts: relentless belief in others. In 2016, Greg and I traveled to Moscow at the invitation of President Yeltsin's grandson, who would become the third partner on our journey to put together a story about the first ever female fighter pilot unit that started by the Russian Army during the Second World War. I vividly remember the morning Greg initially called me. "Geller, I found our story. I read a New York Times obituary." He, of course, immediately gravitated towards the tale of the Night Witches, as it uniquely offered a Greg Howard special, a story with massive heart and enormous emotional stakes. So, in February, in the middle of winter, we land in Moscow. I'm bilingual, so going through customs was much easier. Then, Greg stepped up to the security counter. And it's as though it all switched to slow motion, and now I have a front row seat to a massive train wreck. As the security agent began to ask Greg questions of why he was entering the country, Greg, as many of you know, not one for patience in these situations, turned to me and said, "Geller, you deal with this," and proceeded to walk away. Naturally, that move didn't go over too well because as soon as Greg went left, 2 other security guards went with him. And before I know it, Greg was sitting on a bench in a tiny room, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the country for 10 minutes and I already lost my rider. The trip to Moscow was profound, shocking, emotional, and very informative. Being by Greg's side as he interviewed the surviving member of the Night Witches unit was a day I'll never forget. This almost 90-year-old woman who had front row seats to the horrors of war spent hours with us recounting her stories. What I found incredible was how smoothly and organically Greg would pull information out of her. Those two ostensibly had nothing in common, but Greg had this incredible gift of putting those he interviewed at ease. So here we were in the middle of Moscow in this tiny apartment with this amazing woman who was the hero of the Second World War, with accommodations for successfully bombing the Nazis. And all she wanted to do was to talk about a memory of a traveling salesman on the front lines. Greg's instincts took over immediately, and he leaned in and stayed with this train of thought, and ultimately pulled an incredible story out of her. How the ladies tried to hold on to just a little bit of their femininity by buying makeup from the salesman on the front lines and going up in the air with bright red lips. It didn't matter that when they landed, it was smeared all over their faces due to the oxygen masks they had to wear. They needed to be in a mental space where there was no war. And Greg kept digging and digging to find that moment. That was Greg's true gift, patiently pulling gems out of people he interviewed and turning those moments into profoundly beautiful stories. Greg was a mentor, a confidant, godfather to my boys, but most importantly, he was an honest friend in Hollywood who scolded me when I needed it, growled at me when I offered to give him script notes, and truly loved me with all of his big heart. Barry Josephson and I offer our condolences to the family in this extensive mishpocha. Greg, I already miss the late night conversations, the wisdom, the guidance, and unrelenting support. I know you're sitting up there in your lazy boy chair listening. I hope I didn't make this too boring for you, brother. I love you, and will always cherish our thing. Thank you.
But once I was turned on with history, it's been a lifelong love affair with history, and it started here. And I supported myself doing little odds and ends, and then I got telemarketing, which was the perfect job to be a screenwriter because I worked 5 hours a night from 5 to 9, and during the day, I wrote for 8 hours a day. I worked harder trying to break in, making myself a writer than anything I've ever done in my life. I wrote 18 scripts in 3 years. I literally wrote 8 to 9 hours a day, every day for 3 years, producing a body of work. I had probably 3,000 query letters. Because after you write a script, you got to send a query letter out and everything. See, these kids come up to me all the time. Hey, I want to be a screenwriter. Really? Okay. Here's what I did. Now, maybe there's a shortcut. I didn't know anybody. I'm the only person in the business that I know who broke in without a contact. Everybody comes to Los Angeles with a name, a cousin, a friend, something. And anybody can help you, even a secretary. You need a name. I didn't know anybody. So I had to do it the old-fashioned way. I just had to outwork everybody. So it took 3.5, 4 years. I had thousands of query letters. I had 18 scripts. I just kept pumping and pumping and pumping. And I had made up my mind after 3.5 years, because I was no kid at that point, and I was going to quit. Made up my mind to quit. And I said, I just got to, my mother was worried about me, and, I was worried about me. So I went to the movies, went to Tommy's, and I lived in a Latino gang neighborhood. So I went to Tommy's, got me a couple of those nasty double cheeseburgers, and went to Universal. Because when I get depressed, I go to the movies. I have a lifelong passion for movies. And I watched 4 movies. I was up there 8 hours. It's like a guy before he kills himself, right? That was me. Before I killed myself, I'm going to eat these 2 cheeseburgers, which could have killed me then, and I'm going to watch 4 movies. And my ass was hurting. I was watching them. So I came back home, and the next day I said, I'm going to put this behind me. And there was a message on my message machine. And the guy said, hi, this is Larry Guterman, and I read your script, and they were good. Call me. And I called him up. He was a reader for this big producer manager, Melinda Jason. And he was from Harvard, a Canadian guy, Jewish guy from Canada, and he had finished SC Film School, and he was a reader. He was as entry level as you could be. And that phone call, and we talked for an hour, then met for lunch, and I said, okay, I got some other scripts. And I made him read every single one. He opened the door, made him read every single one. And he kind of helped me. It didn't turn into any money, but he said, you really got talent. See, I wasn't getting any feedback. I didn't know whether I was off, on, was I in the middle, was I good, and that encouraged me and kept me in the business. And I stayed in the business because of that phone call. And we became best friends, and still best friends today.
Larry, go ahead and make your way up. Now, I have 3 brothers, or had 3 brothers, and each brother had a best friend. Wives couldn't get in between them. Friends couldn't get in between them. Larry is Greg's best friend. So, Sarah, I'm sorry that Greg was his best friend, but come on up, Larry. So, Larry Guterman, Greg's best friend, and he's going to tell you how close they were. Each brother, the best friends, and the wives know, don't get in between them, because when they're talking, it's about the 2 of them. Larry.
I still can't believe it. It's like a false reality that he's gone. It makes no sense. Someone so important in your life is here 1 minute and then suddenly gone. I loved him. He was a brother. We first met in person at Bombay Palace in LA, Indian food. Who was this engaging raconteur, this complex personality, this historian with a gift for dialogue and description? Actually, before that, my boss, a producer at Columbia, where I had worked as a junior development exec, had actually said to me, referring to aspiring writers who had not yet made it and weren't represented, and I quote, "Don't waste your time with these people, they will suck you dry." That cruel attitude almost motivated me even more. But the truth is, it shined a light on what was really my first encounter with the phenomenon of the undiscovered gem in Hollywood. Greg had a voice, and the characters leapt off the page, and they were funny and alive and real. He worked on Wall Street, telemarketing, creating a business selling videos for PC computers, then selling insurance. I imagine that must have been where he got his ear for dialogue and bringing characters to life. Still, he was a bit of an enigma to me, where his talent came from. Maybe being the progeny of teachers and educators, he always said in another life he'd have been a history professor, which would have been wonderful, but he ended up doing something that could have much broader impact. He could take history, like the story of the Titans high school team in Virginia, and spin a yarn from it and impact far more people than the author of a dry tome recounting the history of the events. So he was torn between the commercial and the academic his whole life. His solution? Do both. Mentor students to satisfy that side of him while diving deep in creating movie fiction based on history. I was so looking forward to visiting him and spending time reveling in the stories and hearing them again in Miami. There was Caplo, the insurance salesman, which he always noodled as a movie. I could see the poster, the silhouette of a short, round, Danny DeVito-like Jewish insurance salesman and his young apprentice, the much taller and larger Greg. "Don't waste your time on that customer, Greg. He's a China egg. He'll never crack," he would say. Always a great turn of the phrase. He was generous. He gave without people knowing, to students, to mentees. He was supremely generous with our kids, wanted them to learn, sent them subscriptions to Smithsonian and National Geographic, unsolicited, books on how to write, and more. He put money for artwork into film projects. He invested in my hearing loss company. He believed so strongly in one of my passion projects that he said he would rewrite it and make it a real tearjerker. I was with him at the end. The Chabad rabbi came in at Chaim Marcus's encouragement. I don't know if Chaim is here today. Chaim. And I got to meet Mike and Denise, and we became siblings from another mother to help carry on his memory. What an impact he made. He did not mince words, he did not pretend. He wore his heart on his sleeve. You knew where he stood with him. You knew where you stood with him. He loved my parents and talked about forming Blima Narcissus Productions, my mom and his mom's beloved name, becoming great friends perhaps in another life. I had written a TV pilot, and he said, yeah, really solid, like the John Paxson of writing, reliable, serviceable, but no Michael Jordan. Then, when he was living with us, he came in and rewrote the opening. Holy smokes, it elevated things to a whole other level, indirect, elliptical, compelling, yet it contained a high-concept hook mixed with his living, breathing characters. It was fantastic. I actually only wish we could have finished it. What a great writer. His Titan speech at Gettysburg, how he saw the division in this country that only escalated, and what a salve it would have been if people would hear it again. He struck the right balance. Many of you might not know this, but Steve Jobs made Tim Cook watch Remember the Titans before he died, like a week before he died. Why? To teach him about teamwork. Greg sent Tim Cook a signed poster of the movie. In typical Greg style, in addition to his autograph, he scrawled on the poster, "Call me if you need me to rally the troops." Cook apparently kept that poster up in his office. I loved getting him in a good mood. It was a machaya to talk to. We'd talk about coming up together. He'd sing Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead whenever a particularly nefarious personage was on the outs with Hollywood. He talked about how the movie script that inspired him to write screenplays in the first place was Network by Paddy Chayefsky. He used to leave all his clothes, his velour tracksuits, his sneakers, everything at our place in our garage. One time he came back and some of his stuff was gone. Oh boy, was he mad. Mad like I'm never going to talk to you again, mad. I was panicked. What do? We turned the place upside down but could not find it. He wouldn't talk to me. Then I had a brainstorm. Network. I hunted down the director of it, the legendary Sidney Lumet of The Pawnbroker, Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, The Verdict, and Network fame. And I sent Sidney Lumet an original copy of the script and let him know this is the movie that inspired Greg to be in the film business. And Sidney Lumet wrote a personal note to Greg. I got Greg that signed script and waited with bated breath. Then one day I got a call. He loved it. I was back in. He stayed with us for weeks on end. The chair would arrive. I swear I spent weeks at his urging looking for lazy boy couches that would double as movie watching couches. Always a health tip, green juice, but I always worried about him. But when he got sick this time, I thought, no problem. He's going to weather it the way he did all the others, not even a second thought. I missed him from the second I got to Miami. Who was I going to talk to listen to regale me with his tales? He's my mishpacha. A sweet, sweet soul. He used to say, Guterman, we came from modest circumstances, and we came at her with no connections to the business and made it. He was the smartest guy in the room, but never made you feel that. He always was interested in others' opinions. I guess his way of observing the world as a writer. He was a great man. He brought people together. Who can say they've done that? Denzel said, don't touch his dialogue. The movie was his through and through. When you see the picture of Greg on his high school football team and the still from the movie, it's the same. My wife Sarah's relatives were just talking about the impact that movie had in Virginia. I said to him one time, Greg, you're like the Zelig of writers, inhabiting different personalities and personas when interacting with different people to get what you need to write, and he grinned a Cheshire Cat grin to me. Sure, he could get upset and angry like everyone, but the anger came from a pure place, a sense of loyalty. Friendship, the importance of a deep, deep bond, not friends of convenience. He talked to me about us ending up on the beach in the Caribbean sipping margaritas and enjoying the waves. I was looking forward to that. I sat in his balcony in Miami in his final days with his giant empty slippers next to me. No one can fill those slippers. I love you, Greg.
I don't really have a formula. I have a specialty, which is true story. See, once again, history. See, because once you break in as a screenwriter, they want to pick your brain. What do you got? What do you got? Okay? And even a couple of people I mentored, I tried to warn them. I said, now if you get in, They're gonna say, what do you got? And you better have something. Because they want, you better have a well to draw from. Oh, did I have a well? I was the first black flavor of the month. When I broke in the late 80s, early 90s, there was not a single full-time employed black screenwriter in Hollywood. Not one. There was Spike Lee, but he was director-writer. But there was not a single black screenwriter as a standalone. There were a couple black screenwriters doing it part-time. They were full-time professors and part-time screenwriters. There's not a single black standalone screenwriter in Hollywood. I was the first one. My play, Tinseltown Trilogy, got me in the door, and then you start getting assignments. I didn't pay much. I was getting a little bit above the Writers Guild minimum. It was a lot of money for me. I've been living in a Latino gang neighborhood. My rent was $500 a month. My piece of shit car was paid for, and this agent he told me when he signed me at ICM, he said, I'm gonna make you the first A-list black screenwriter, and the only one. I said, okay. He said, I'm gonna get you so much work, you're gonna beg me to stop. I said, that'll never happen. Have you seen where I live? He said, just leave it to me. Within 6 weeks, he got me 40 meetings. I met Michelle Pfeiffer. Denzel flew back from Italy to meet me. Patrick Swayze. I met everybody in 6 weeks. I'd go into a restaurant, they say, Greg, it's over here like, it was crazy. I don't know what the hell he did. And sure enough, after 6 weeks, I walked into his office and said, that's enough. He got me 7 film deals in 6 weeks. 7. Let me tell you how bad I was. I didn't have a credit card until I was 40 years old. Did not have one. My credit was shot. To buy a condo, he had to write a letter to the bank. My agent had to write a letter. You think I'm bullshit? Had to write a letter to the bank president. We stand behind him as an agent, blah, blah, blah. So I could get a loan from the bank to buy a condo. So I went from that gang neighborhood to, then the enormous $250,000 condo in Glendale and bought a, a Range Rover. This is overnight.
Only Greg. We will now hear from Greg's reader, proofreader, sounding board, and longtime friend, Jody Podolsky. Come on up, Jody. Jody, in conjunction with Melvin, crafted today's program. So Jody, thank you.
I'm going to start with echoing thank you. I'm going to start with echoing what Larry said. Greg, your voice has been baked into my brain for so many years, decades. It is synaptically impossible to accept that this is your memorial. So I'm speaking to you today, not to the many who are here to mourn, to you. We met in 1993 when producer Warren Zide sent me Tinseltown Trilogy. And aside from a long patch when I pissed you off and we didn't talk, that is how I've known you ever since, through your work. I read you and proofed your pages, and I'll leave it at this, was your personal D-girl, as we used to say in the 1990s, an anachronism I hope is no longer in use, a painstaking process that over many years would affect the atmosphere of my whole house. My husband and our 2 kids, Solomon and Gilda, awaiting, ideally, your approbation. You always needed it done now. The turnaround, though I'd completely clear my calendar, was never fast enough. But from that perch, I got to see what your marvelous mind was up to. Numerous HuffPo pieces, letters to editors, essays on the GOAT, screenplays on Harriet Tubman, Misty Copeland, the Black Panthers, a project on a man who served the longest erroneous incarceration. He's in Detroit, actually, for over 40 years. A scintillating star is born back when, for Denzel and Whitney, 2 people who do not need last names, an Emmett Till script that reduced me to a puddle, I remember being on the phone with you, Greg, to discuss sobbing. Stop that crying! Such wrenching and stunning work. You were not an easy gig, Greg. You were not a casual client, but you were a magnanimous friend. In the old days, you'd say to me, Fern! I've been practicing that. Fern came from a character he invented for A Star is Born. I'm sure you will not be able to fathom the correlation. It was a mouthy, Jewishy journalist character whom he named Fern Podolsky. So my namesake became my nickname. Fern, he'd say, I'm giving you morsels only 2-3 people in the world know. What a gift to be in the thrall of your capacious intellect and humor, and always by phone, rarely in person, a voice in my head, baked in my brain. Many, many hours spent listening to your colorful rants about the screen trade, the business, which we knew, if you're lucky, puffs you up, and if you're human, cuts you down. The frustrations, the travails. But today I'll stick to the good and the gallant, the bold and the brilliant. When my sister had a life-altering accident in Detroit, you visited and wrote an email for friends and family that lifted us like a sermon from the soul of the universe. And when my mom moved to assisted living, you sent her a bonsai tree kit because you knew she'd be lifted by something to tend. And when you saw my daughter dance, you arranged a private tour on your cherished Alvin Ailey in New York City and lifted her sights to the behind the scenes of excellence. Always lifting others, Greg, made most plain by the college-bound mentees you advised, guided, fought for, and funded. You, Greg, you. Will you let us lift you back? You are an amazing, complicated, inimitable person. This past September, October, you barked into the phone, Fern, and said something about your future funeral. A joke followed, but I was unnerved. My mind then and still cannot compute this. Too many icons left to teach us about, to inspire us with. A Joe Louis project, Bobby Seale, your beloved Fannie Lou Hamer, Greg, you, your voice, your work, your words baked into my brain. The titan we will remember is you.
When you start out as a writer in Hollywood, you're just getting assignments. You know, and I turn stuff in, and I say, well, why aren't they? He said, my agent, you know, he had a sense of humor. He used to call me handsome. He said, handsome, don't worry about it. You just keep writing. One day, everything you write will be made. You just keep turning. Your job is to turn in great scripts and build your reputation for turning in great scripts. Whether they make them or not, you have no, and he was right, you have no control or power over it. They'll start, oh, they're going to make it, they're going to make it, they're going to make it. No, we're not going to make it. We love you, but we're not going to. And that went, and I got so frustrated. And he says, just hang in there, just keep writing. Titans was after Ali. I got the Ali assignment before Titans. You know, so the thing is, you just keep writing, and eventually 1 or 2 or 3 will get made. Listen, I'm doing Harriet Tubman, which is my first script, 20 years old. I have not changed a word. I was in New York, we got our director, and we're going to talent next week. Got an A-list producer, Deborah Martin, who produced Princess Diaries. I didn't change a word. He was right. All you gotta, he said, you just turn in great work. He said, if it sits on the shelf for a while, so what? He said, you'll be able to pull this off the shelf eventually and get it made. And he was absolutely right.
Our A-list producer, Deborah Martin Chase. Please join us.
I'm going to be the one. As we've all talked about today, Greg was okay, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to get through this. You got this. Okay, I got it. Was a gentleman, and he was a scholar. Two attributes that everywhere in the world are revered, but in Hollywood are not keys to success. But nevertheless, Greg was a great success, had a great career, and he did it his way. In the 1990s, I was running Denzel's company, and in retrospect, it was a renaissance of black films and black filmmakers, and we were all looking for great material and great writers. As has been said, Greg's play, Tinseltown Trilogy, hit Hollywood with a bam, and all of a sudden, everybody was talking about, have you met Greg Howard? Oh my God, Greg Howard, Greg Howard, Greg Howard, Greg Howard. And he was meeting everybody. Everybody wanted to work with him. Sorry. He was a very hot commodity. I met Greg during that period when he came to my office for a general meeting, and we instantly bonded. Two black Ivy Leaguers committed to telling positive stories about black people, to breaking down stereotypes, and to making mainstream big studio movies. But you know, after a while, Greg found himself spread too thinly. He'd taken on too many projects, and he kind of stalled. Not hard to happen when you are starting out in your career, and legends like Quincy Jones are trying to, keep you tied up, and famous producers and directors all want to work with you. And studio heads are calling you. I mean, as he just said there, I'm not surprised he had that many projects in that short of a time, because he was the dude. But Greg decided to leave LA for a while eventually, to go back to Virginia, to go back to his roots, to regroup and recenter himself. And one of the lessons that I have learned in life is that sometimes the periods of greatest personal productivity come after real soul searching, real uncertainty, because I think it's the universe's way of telling you to open your heart and open your mind and maybe to look at things a little differently. And so it was in Greg's case, because going back to Virginia brought him Remember the Titans, which was the turning point in his career, which was the thing that catapulted him into that whole next level of being. It's a perfect movie. And for me, it's one of the great ones. And after that, Greg really found his stride. He continued to live on the East Coast, but he would, do his work in Hollywood. He was a writer in great demand. He had other great movies, including Ali with Will Smith. So in 2014, Greg calls me. At this point, I'd been a producer at Disney for over a decade. So I had some relationships at the Mouse House. And he says, I have this script that has been sitting there forever. And 12 Years a Slave had come out and done well. And he said, I think perhaps Hollywood is ready to tell the story of the Underground Railroad conductor, Harriet Tubman. And I was like, I said to myself, oh no, a slave movie. I don't know that we need another slave movie. But it was Greg, and he's my friend, and I said, of course I will read it. Greg's gift, as he's talked about up there, was to meld that deep understanding and love of history with his commercial instincts that were honed. All those moves when he was growing up, all the different people that he met, all the different lives that he touched, helped him to understand people intrinsically. And so to be able to combine that with the history and understanding people, he could create stories that touched your heart and that pushed your mind. Greg had positioned Harriet as never before as a badass, historical action heroine, and it was fresh and it was exciting. And I can remember, I can to this day see myself walking down Central Park South in New York, and we finally got him on the phone. And I was like, dude, she's Pam Grier. She's like a real life action hero. And I am totally on board with you. Let's go, let's do this. So that began our 5-year journey to bring his script to the screen. We met with directors, we met with cast, we had, lunches at all the, the hot spots in Hollywood, doing our thing and conferring afterwards. And we were intent on making the movie. And as is the movie-making process, others joined us along the way. The fabulous Casey Lemons, my director, Danielle Taplin-Lumberg. But in the end, it's because of Greg's incredible work and his vision that Harriet Tubman has been elevated to a whole other level in our society. She's appreciated, understood, and honored as never before. In fact, last year, the CIA unveiled a statue of her at Langley to honor and celebrate her as one of America's greatest heroes. We're still working on the $20 bill. But none of this would have happened without Greg. It started in that beautiful mind and heart of his. Honestly, I'm crying because I think didn't really hit me till today. And he's just gone too soon. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
If you wanted to put something on my epitaph, it would be very simply, tried to make my mother proud. That's it. Spent a lifetime doing that. That was it. See, I think when I was like 8 or 9 or something like that, I started to realize that death was a feature of life. I don't know, for some reason, somebody hit me. I told my mom, I said, Mommy, one day you're gonna die. I was young, I was like 8 or 9 or something. And she laughed, it's so funny. She cracked up. She said, yeah, of course. She said, I don't want you to die, Mommy. And she said, well, don't worry about that. We got a long, long way to go. And it's true, because you passed at 92. And she said, just make me proud. And I said, okay, Mommy, that I will do. Proud. And I said, okay, Mommy, that I will do. That's
Okay, we have Sarah Guterman, Gigi Guterman, Alexa, I'm going to mess up your name, so Alexa, come on up. Jerry Barton, Marcus Theus, please join us on stage. These, Sarah's Larry's wife, and many of the mentees. Gretchen, if you'd like to come up, you're welcome to come up. They're going to give some words, and then we're going to have family. But after they finish speaking, we're going to have some music from our musician, wherever he went. And then we'll go into the family responses about Greg, okay?
Hello, all. I'm here to introduce the mentees and to speak about Uncle Shmuley. So I inherited Greg, as you know. When I met Larry, it was a package deal. And what I soon learned is we all know what he looked like on the outside, but what I discovered was on the inside, he was more like your Jewish grandmother. He was a yenta who would get her feelings hurt. You didn't know why, you didn't know where, what happened, but you gotta just smooth it over. And many times I found myself saying, you know, we're just gonna hug it out, we're family, we're here, you can be mad, but we're gonna be here with you the whole way. So, cut to, we had kids, 3 little blonde mischief makers that happened very quickly and unexpectedly. And Greg said, well, I'll be the godfather. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know what a godfather was, but I immediately just said, well, we'll use that soul of his, and I dubbed him Uncle Shmuley. Don't know why, but it stuck. So he became the uncle and grandparent. He was omnipresent at our house, as Larry and many alluded to. I would come home, open the door, and I would see the lazy boy appear in my house. That meant Uncle Shmuley had moved back in, and it was just fluid. He was there every grandparents' day. He was there. He was the only uncle my kids ever knew, and he was a great one, and we loved him. And this is just, it's just too much. So mentees, I think Gigi, my daughter, is the last mentee. I've had mentees at my house. I have helped, and I admired him so much for what he did under the radar. And with that, I have the task of reading without prior reading something from Dasha, one of his mentees. And Dasha writes, as a scientist, I've always learned that DNA defines family, but as life has taught us, it's more the bonds that make family. It's those who are there for you, who teach you, guide you, support you, and at times even reprimand you. It's the people who take the time to instill in you beliefs, those who take the time to help you and be there in the good and the bad. Many have family that is chosen, myself included. Greg was exactly that to me, family. At a young age of 15, I chose him to become family. I still can't believe he's gone. Greg was my mentor, my friend, and like a father to me. I was his daughter. He was always reminding me to never settle for anything less than the best and to always give it my all. Greg was there for me through every step and every application process of my career path, through many heartbreaks, through many heartbreaks and many hurtful people who crossed my path. He was also there to celebrate with me through the years. He taught me so much, and I wasn't ready to say goodbye. I envisioned him there for so many more to come. Day after Doctor's Day being his memorial has meaning to me. He always wanted to see me operate, and I hope he's looking down and seeing me do just that every day. Hope I'm making you proud, and I hope to continue doing just that. The way you gave back, I hope I can someday do that too for many. With that said, what I will forever carry with me is his huge heart and passion to give back. I love you, I miss you, and I thank you for always being there. That's Dasha, one of his mentees. I'll let everybody else introduce themselves except for Gigi Guterman, who he claimed as a writer, and she has done that, and I'm super proud of her.
Hi, I'm gonna read a poem for Uncle Shmuley. A ring knocked off the table and rolled across the floor, each section of circumference, the thin kissing the boards, lapping up the previous line, then falling straight behind, and then around again, a never-ending spine. I followed it, for it was mine, I couldn't bear to lose, not one more inspiration source for writing up my blues. You were the hues that flowed forth from the fountain to incubate the squids that give, for riding up the mountains, the ink that does inscript. And so, for riding up the mountains, traversing far-off lands, for riding horses, written turns to centaurs, magic hands, riding down the highlands and writing down the tales. The guidance in your speech provided me with every trail. Where tulips blossomed along the frame and paper grew on trees, and just beyond, a boundless cornfield, keen ears hearkening to me. I caught the ring and noticed that old hole in the floorboard where just yesterday a leak came through, so a patch it had incurred. And had it not, my ring'd be gone, my inspiration too. But you, the hue of flowing water, just established as the truth, saved the day. From beyond, you are still paving my way.
Hi, I'm Alexa Walkowitz. It's hard to say. I was one of Greg's, and always be, one of his mentees, and I was introduced to him by Sarah and Larry Guterman. William Strunk Jr. wrote, "A careful and honest writer does not need to worry about style." This is, of course, a natural conclusion to arrive at in a book called The Elements of Style. He continues, "Your style will emerge because you yourself will emerge, and when this happens, you will find it increasingly easy to break through barriers that separate you from other minds and other hearts." That book was a fitting gift from Greg, whose own gift was a singular ability to build worlds out of words, to take things that would be ineffable to any other person and breathe into it a new life. I would say that I could not describe in any words the impact that Greg had on my life, but I know without a shadow of a doubt that Greg would be the first person to tell me that I was wrong. Our words are more powerful than we can ever know. People like Greg are rare. He had a lively, room-filling spirit and an endlessly generous soul. We met as a part of his personal project, his college mentorship program. He had this near psychic ability to pinpoint in other people the things that they could not see in themselves. I would look in the mirror those days and see a headstrong teenager and was a bit aimless and naive, but Greg truly saw a person and not a project. I was really terrified to apply to college, and I went to a really small, blue-collar high school, and let alone the caliber of schools that he wanted me and dreamed that I would attend, but he inundated me with stories about Princeton and about how attending that university changed his life. He edited my essays, he tutored me, he spent hours upon hours mentoring and supporting me, and mercilessly, hilariously tearing into my application supplements for using excessive commas. He called it the Alexa comma. When I made mistakes, he made sure I learned from them. He was never just a mentor, he was family, Uncle Shmuley. He mailed me boxes and boxes of literature he wanted me to read, books that opened my mind to places, people, and paths I otherwise would have never imagined. Each time I opened one of those books, or even just one of his many emails where he addressed me as A, I knew in my heart that Greg didn't just see me, he believed in me in a time that I couldn't. This level of kindness and faith can't be shaken. Greg's support has ushered me through high school and college and now into my adult life. He once told me to never tell anybody what they should think of me. Let them draw their own conclusions. And out of Greg's tireless mentorship, a self emerged. And his insights rang true. He wrote himself into the world around us. If the principal reward of writing is, as Strunk said, to break the barriers that separate you from other minds, I think Greg holds the largest boon. He lives on in our minds and hearts, and especially in the words we speak to keep him alive. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Marcus Tews.
Dr. Marcus.
Doctor. I am here to honor the memory of a dear friend and mentor, Greg, Mr. Howard. Mentoring is a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. Greg played a pivotal role in my life, and I will always cherish the memories I have of him. When I was 17, I had only lived in the Bay Area. I did not imagine venturing far for college. That is when I met Greg. His late brother, my history teacher, introduced us. We met at a local Starbucks to discuss my college prospects. I was nervous. Greg's warm smile and unwavering enthusiasm immediately put me at ease. He listened to my concerns and fears and offered valuable advice. Greg had taken the leap from Vallejo to New Jersey for college, and he encouraged me to do the same. Greg shared colorful stories of his college adventures. He reminisced about the grand lectures, intimate seminars, reading periods in Dean's Date, eating clubs, reunions, and the P-Raid. He warned me about the rigors of the freshman writing seminar and the senior thesis. He gave me my first copy of The Elements of Style, which I used to craft my admission essays. And with his urging, I submitted my application packet right before the deadline. When I received the news of my Princeton admission, Greg was the first person with whom I wanted to share the news. He shared in my joy. Before I made the move to college, he put me in contact with the son of one of his classmates so I could have a familiar face on campus. Over the next 4 years, Greg continued to encourage me. We shared in the excitement of my new experiences and talked through the challenges of feeling imposter syndrome and being a small fish in a large pond. When I completed my senior thesis and graduated, Greg shared in my triumph. One of my fondest memories of Greg was his annual holiday invitations. He welcomed my family with open arms, and we enjoyed celebrating holidays together by watching new films, sharing delicious hors d'oeuvres, and catching up. It was a cherished part of the holiday tradition, and I will always remember the warmth and spirit that Greg brought to these gatherings. Greg's kindness and generosity knew no bounds, and his influence will stay with me forever. He embodied the ethos that when you walk through the door of opportunity, you don't slam it shut behind you, you hold it open. His endless encouragement gave me the confidence to pursue my dreams, and I will continue to draw from this for years to come. As a mentor, Greg understood the importance of exposing young people to new experiences outside of their comfort zones. He was always pushing me to try new things and broaden my horizon. His influence had a profound impact on my life. As a mentor and friend, Greg embodied the definition of what it means to be a support system, someone who listens, encourages, and guides. His legacy lives on in the countless lives of those who he touched, including myself. Thank you, Greg, for everything.
Come on up, Gretchen. I'm going to do a quick commercial. You all received a little card that has a QR code on it? Yes. Okay, so I'm an AKA, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and we have started an endowment for Greg. It's called the Gregory Allen Howard Endowment. And the focus of this scholarship that we'd like you to donate to is for screenwriters, writers, producers, and political activists. And the Educational Advancement Foundation for Alpha Kappa Alpha gives scholarships to both undergraduate and graduate students in whatever field. So we felt the way to carry on Greg's legacy was to continue to give scholarships. Now, Gretchen is going to be your next speaker. His first Howard Lonsdale scholarship went to Gretchen, $10,000. a little girl from Vallejo who wasn't sure what she was going to do. And she says, "It's really $10,000." And Greg says, "That will make a difference in your life." Gretchen.
Thank you, Lynette. So I didn't know I was going to speak today, but I know Greg would say, "This is why you stay ready." But I remember just being that 17-year-old, leaving Vallejo, having not ventured out at all, and going out into the world. And I'm just so thankful for Greg for being a mentor, for being my family, for always reaching out. No matter how busy he was, always just reaching out and keeping connected. I'm thankful for him as a mentor and family, just for having that foresight. You need those people who breathe life into you and can see far out when you're just not there yet. If you would have told me that at that time when I was 17 that I would be an educator and pursue a PhD in chemistry, I probably would have laughed. But Greg saw, "You're going to do great things." He saw that I was going to go to graduate school. He saw that I was going to travel the world. And I'm just so incredibly grateful. When I moved back to California, I was in Philadelphia for graduate school. We immediately connected again, and he would just invite us over to have dinner. I'm thankful he had the opportunity to meet my daughter, Brooklyn, who's here with me today, and he just immediately loved on her like his own nieces and nephews. So again, I'm grateful, and I've heard so many words that stand out, just that unrelenting drive. And I'm grateful that that's something he instilled in me. Is he always asks me, "Okay, this is what you're doing now, but what are you doing 5 years from now? Okay, have you thought about what you're doing 10 years from now?" And me, I'm like, okay, I better get myself together, right? But that's Greg, that infectious desire to think about the next steps, to do better, to instill that in. And now my children, that's something that I'll carry with me forever. I think, like many of you, I'm still processing, and because of those fond memories, that joyous laugh that everyone's talked about, that smile, I can still feel his presence, and that is something that I'm going to carry with me. I love you, Greg, and thank you so much.
All right, the hour is growing long, and my family likes to talk. So all of y'all come on up. We're gonna hear from my little brother. He's always been the baby. I was talking to him on the phone one time, and they said, "Well, how old is he?" And he was like 40. I was talking to my little brother. "Well, how old is he?" "He's 40. You talk to him like he's 12. So Mike is gonna talk. He's a storyteller like Greg, so we're gonna cut him off. Where's my musician? You can just play him right off. And then the rest of the family will speak. So we have Michael, then OZ, and Ibrahim in Valencia. Then we have Robin and Ziggy and Rachel. Is Rachel coming up? No, okay. All right. And Robin's father's here, and he'll speak when Robin and Ziggy speaks. Okay? Where's my musician? So when I give you the high sign, play them off. Okay, Mike.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Henley. I'm the youngest of the five. I'll keep it short. We traveled cross country from time every 18 months. And when Pops went out to sea, Greg was in charge. For his height, he was as tall as most sailors. He was in charge of taking care of the boys. Debbie was in charge of taking care of the girls. And Greg's first experience with the mean sea captain which they called my father, wasn't a mean sea captain. He was just in charge of the boat, not used to having people tell him no. And when you come home and your kids say you don't want to take the trash out, he's like, Tissy, talk to the kids. I'm going to the room. So Greg learned early, thank you, when he came in crying one day. He was playing with the boys, came in crying, and Pop said, what's wrong with you? He said, the kids are messing with me. He said, don't come in here crying. Go back out there and take care of your business like you're supposed to. And my mother wasn't happy with that response, but he said he needs to learn now to be a man and stand up for himself. And with that, he went back outside and never had any more problems standing up for himself. So when you hear him encourage you to go out there, it wasn't even if he got beat up or failed, it was a matter that he had to try. And with that, he never stopped trying. And then he took us out. So we had one example was he took us boys to the gym, taught my brother he was coaching him in basketball. I said, you'd be great at basketball. And they came up with the 2-on-2, but he lost the game by 1 point. My older brother, Ricky, went crazy and beat the boy all the way back to the other basket. Greg jumped off the bleachers, asking what was wrong with you, are you crazy? He said, you lost the game fairly. I want you to go back and shake that guy's hand, go get him, shake his hand, tell him you're sorry. You need to practice more, do better next time, and you'll have an opportunity to be better. We learned in our jokes and everything came from traveling back and forth cross country in the station wagon, telling these stories to each other. But Greg was the guy who, at 13, because of his height, he could bag groceries, and everybody he met, every day we come back home, he's telling us these stories about all the people he met. We're just standing there like, wow, these people are crazy. This is the things that's where his storytelling came in. So I know he loved his mentees. That was one of his joys. And now Gretchen, I know who that picture is that was right by his door when he walked into his studio for writing. You were right there on the entrance to his door. Everybody in Vallejo knows him for helping out the kids, coming back, reaching back. It was a joy. Vallejo is shocked. I know the rest of the country is shocked, and we'll all miss him. If you ever you want to see Greg, look at his movies, his writings. Greg's in those stories. Remember the Titans? You'll see his statements in there, those things that we grew up with. You see the Ali story. So words, some of the way you crafted the script, that's Greg. So you start missing Greg, come back, look at those movies, he's there. You know, I'll get waved off at this point.
Get waved off. Hold on. Ozzy, Robin's last.
This is on the behalf of my sister. She is currently in D.C. My name is Ibrahim Kamar, the great nephew of Uncle Greg. Dear Uncle Greg, I miss you. I wish we had more time to spend together. I know you have always wanted the best for me and Ibrahim. I'm going to work hard to make sure that you are proud of the person I am and will become. I want everything you did for us to be worth it. You are such a great uncle, and I'm in awe of everything you have accomplished. Uncle Greg, you are one of the main people I look up to.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ozi Kamara. This is my lovely wife, Valencia. I met Uncle Greg when I was around 21. And the first thing he did, he came up to me. He put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Welcome to the family, son. In this family, the men, we cook." And I was thinking today, over the years I've known Uncle Greg, I've never seen him cook one thing. But one thing he was good at was delegation. And he delegated me to cook things that I never thought I could ever cook. Like, when I first met him, I was good at cooking rice, oatmeal, those type of things, but I improved and he believed in me. He saw things in myself that I never saw, So I just know, over the time I knew him, I learned so many things, read so many books. Some of the books you guys mentioned, he sent me the same books. I read them and applied them to my life, and I went from cooking rice to open my own restaurant. And Uncle Greg is just one of the people in my life I wanted to make proud. And I'm just happy to say that I believe I've made him proud. And I'm happy to see everyone here smiling and feeling the same way I feel. I miss Uncle Greg. And thank you.
It seems like we're short for time, so I'm going to keep this quick. My name is Valencia Kamara. Used to be Valencia Henley. I'm his niece. I'm one of his nieces. Uncle Greg, he and all of my family were very driven and wanted all of us to do well. And man, there were times where I'd be like, I'd have to ask like my grandma, like, "Uncle Greg, is he hard on me, or is this just like, is this how uncles are?" And like I had to check in, like, is this what it's supposed to be? And she'd say, "Yeah, this is he wants you to be the best that you can be." And it didn't make sense. It took a while for me to understand it. But looking back and knowing now, I appreciate every time you told me, every time you sent back an email, every time you sent back a text message, every time you said, "Stop using the word like in a sentence. Like, just say the word, just say what you want to say." I appreciate it. But not like that. Let's see. He's just an awesome uncle. One of my fondest memories of him was when I was in college. He took me on a trip to New Orleans for the Essence Festival, and he showed me like all these amazing things. Like, he showed me his lifestyle, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. But one of the memories that's gonna like forever live in my brain, we were walking up to the Superdome. This was before Katrina, like a month before Katrina, and I was just like taken back. I'm from California, so I haven't really seen, we're diverse out here, right? So I've never seen so many different shades, so many different images and looks of who we are as Black people. And as we were walking up, I was just overwhelmed, and I pulled him to the side, and he was like, "What, are you dehydrated? Are you, like, what's wrong? Is it the humidity getting to you? I know you're in the South, you're not used to this." I was like, no, just sit back with me right here on this stand. And as we were sitting there, I was just like, he's like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "Nothing's wrong. It's just, you have shown me something that I've never seen before. You showed me us. You showed me like every single color, every single shape, shade, like the true beauty of us. It gave like the essence of us." And he showed me that at the Essence Festival. And he was like, he looked at me, he was like, "Wow, boo." Family calls me boo. "Wow, boo, you have an eye for organic beauty. I never would have thought that." So it was beautiful, and that's one of my fondest memories of him that I'll keep forever. He has a
This is my son. He has a niece, a great niece, Zariah. She's not here with us today. She's in DC on her 8th grade trip. But he put so much into her. She would be like scared to talk to him, like, you need to talk to Uncle Greg. He's gonna make you better. And he's like, okay. So their bond built a little bit stronger, and she's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant, like top of her class. And he'd always say, well, you're gonna go to Princeton one day. You're gonna go somewhere. You're gonna go to one of these Ivy League colleges. And I'd say, okay, well, you know, mentor her, get her there. So he's not here with us now, but with all the mentors in the room, please keep an eye out for her, keep an ear out for her, just like he would do for you and your kids. Help her get to wherever she wants to go. So, yeah, thank you guys.
Come here, little dude. I can hold it. Yeah, I want you to stand over here, though, so people can see you. Okay.
Dear Uncle Greg, you are a movie writer, and I want to make movies. Can you write in cursive? I can't. You would say, hey, boy, and I miss that. Remember me, Zicky. I wish you hadn't been killed by your sickness. Soon I will make a movie about you.
Thanks, sweetie.
I shall make this brief. I'm Robert Bacon. I am Greg's brother-in-law. I married his older sister. Greg introduced me and gave me a love of movies, Bogart, Casablanca, Maltese Falcon. He introduced me to Alvin Ailey, and I loved that. I just couldn't get over that. But I went to Stanford in '66, and there were about 30 black kids out of about 5,000 or 6,000 on the campus. Stanford realized that they needed to get some more black students, and they started admitting black students wholesale, several of whom really had no business being there. So there was a thing, by my senior year, there was sort of an unspoken thing of, well, I don't want these people to ruin my reputation. You know, I don't want them to bring down my education from those who felt that they belonged there. Debbie would tell me always that her brother was a raconteur. I know what the hell a raconteur was, but I wasn't going to let her know that I didn't know. And over the years, I found the meaning of the word, but it wasn't until the last time I saw Greg in person. Unfortunately, it was at Ricky's memorial, at his brother's memorial. But Greg sat on the lazy boy at the family home, and he took his seat, and he commenced to racketeering and telling his stories, and we all sat there attentively. And I finally realized that he was truly a raconteur. I want to say one thing. I want y'all, Lynette, Michael, Robin, I implore you to live, because I don't want to come out here for no more memorials or funerals or nothing like that. I want y'all to throw dirt on my grave. You come to Texas and bury me.
Yes, that's right.
So I realize that I am probably the last big obstacle between all of you and lunch. I am sensitive to that. I have a watch. I will keep my eye on the prize. Before I say anything, even to introduce myself, I want to thank all the people who made this possible. I'll start with Melvin McRae and Jody Podolsky. I'll add my Aunt Lynette, who's guided us through it. And more than anything else, I want to thank my wife, Rachel Martin, because without her, this literally would not have been possible.
From arranging for us to be able to meet here in this beautiful space, to pulling together everything necessary, and the beautiful lunch that I'm keeping you from eating. Thank you, Rachel. So now, I was a little hesitant about whether I should speak at all. It's such a long program, and Greg knew so many people, but I think I should tell you guys about the Greg that I knew. Because the Greg I knew is a little bit different than the Greg it seems like anybody else knew. I'm Debbie's daughter. Debbie was the girl with the goofy smile and all those young pictures of Greg. And the two of them, they were Irish twins, just slightly more than a year apart. They were each other's most loyal allies and most bitter enemies. And as Greg put it, he stayed away from Stanford to get away from my mom for the first time in his life. He was there the day I was born. His plane had been delayed. He was a year out of Princeton. My mom was only 25, and we were living in DC, and Greg had ended up in DC, and that means that literally every day of my life, my Uncle Greg was there. And I was a lucky kid, because my mom's siblings were teenagers. Greg was the oldest, and he was all of 23. And so that means that they didn't know they were supposed to be responsible. And so I was lucky enough to grow up surrounded by all of these people who I thought of more as my big siblings than I did as aunts and uncles, and Greg most of all. Greg wasn't really an uncle to me. Greg was like a cross between a father, a big brother, and Gandalf the wizard. He would just show up in my life and bring magic. When I was a little kid, he teased me about my last name, which I inherited from my father, Robert Bacon, called me Grease. He used to take his hand, announce that it was the Claw, and chase me through my grandmother's house to tickle me. He let me follow him around like a baby duck, even letting me cuddle up next to him for warmth on the couch when we watched TV. When I got to be a little bit older, Greg started taking me to the movies. It was amazing because he would let me leave the house without making me comb my hair first, something no one else in my family would do. And we would go and watch 4 movies in a day and do it the old-fashioned way. We bought a ticket to one, and we'd just go to the bathroom when that one was over and walk into the next theater. And so by age 10, I was an experienced film jumper. I'm sure they were all entirely age appropriate. I have no doubt of that. We also watched hours of TV at home, and Greg taught me about the rules of comedy, the genius of the movie network, and so much about The Godfather that when I was in 6th grade, I tried to start my own organized crime family. It didn't take. For the rest of my life, I feel like I never stopped being that baby duck. Greg and I went to movie premieres, sporting events, we traveled, we went to Paris. We saw the Mona Lisa and the Eiffel Tower, and I kid you not, until the day he died, the only thing he ever talked about that trip was the delicious roast chicken we had at some apparently world-famous hole-in-the-wall restaurant called something like Chez Louis Lamy. The man would literally call me up and say, "Have you told people you know that you had a roast chicken at Chez Louis Lamy?" And I promised him, I think I still have these text messages, I promised him I'd find a way to work it into the next conversation. 8 years ago, when I called him to say that I was pregnant and I was having a little boy, he got choked up. And all he could say is, "We get to raise a boy together." And he started to text me all the names he wanted me to name my son. And they were terrible. It was one bad idea after another, ending with suggesting that we name him Howard Martin, which he said in his text message, "That sounds like a university president." To which I answered in 1963, "No." Greg was like a superhero. When he was a little kid, his favorite superhero was Thor, and he actually had a big hammer and a blonde wig that he would wear at Halloween. And if he was a superhero, then I was his sidekick. And if I think about it, I'm not sure there was ever a time in my life when Greg and I actually lived in the same city. Most of my life, we didn't even live in the same state. And I can't think of a single time, a single moment, even now in my life, when I didn't feel like he was with me. when I didn't feel like he was standing right next to me. We all know Greg was a talker, and he told me a million stories and asked me a million questions, and we talked about a million things. But one of the things he loved to tell me about were all the things he had done that hadn't worked, all the times he'd failed. I heard so much about his time in New York, on Wall Street, that time he went bankrupt, the time he started a business that didn't succeed, the months that he spent telemarketing and nobody would buy anything from him, all the screenplays he wrote that nobody wanted to give him the time of day. He spent at least as much time telling me about all the things he had tried that hadn't worked as he ever did about the things that did work. And I didn't really think about it until basically I was thinking about what to say today. But if you were to ask me, what is the greatest gift that I got from my Uncle Greg? Other than literally every single thing about me in my life, because I cannot think of a single thing that he wasn't right there, even if he wasn't in the room with me. That man taught me to have no fear. If you never fail, you were not trying hard enough. If you never piss anybody off, you're not pushing hard enough, and that's a quote. And if you never give up, if you try, if you make your superpower the ability to wake up every day and just throw yourself against that wall again, who knows what's going to come of it, but one thing you'll know is you left nothing behind, and Greg left nothing behind. And if I do nothing else with my life but honor that and teach my son to honor that, then I will have shown Greg that he was the best friend, uncle, brother, and wizard a girl could ever hope to meet. Thank you all so much for coming today.
It's a dark place outside. We watch the news and we get confused. We think it's a reality. And even for a positive person like myself, sometimes I'm not sure. But I don't want to leave this room right now. Because in this room right now is what I think is the real world. It's a Greg Howard world. It's a world filled with love, with heart, with soul, with a commitment to bring stories that will inspire us to be better people to life. And that's Greg. And I'm sorry to the organizers, but I hope we could do this again. Can we do this annually? I feel like being in this room is being with Greg, because I don't know that many people in this room. I thought I was one of his only best friends, but turns out he has 85. And I really hope I get a chance to meet you and spend time with you and to celebrate Greg's life and to take, his light went out. He's no longer living, but his soul is as bright as it ever was. And I'm going to leave this room today and commit myself to bring more light into this world. That we lost that light when Greg left, but I'm going to bring more, and I hope everybody will do the same. God bless all of you. I love you. I love you, Greg. I didn't love you. I love you forever. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're finally at the end of the program. We're going to end with this last clip that really spoke to who Greg was. You saw a little bit of it, and we're going to play it again. And then we want you to join us outside for lots and lots of food. One of Greg's favorite things is to have good food. And you all have no idea how wonderful it was that you spent today with us. You love Greg like we love Greg. And so enjoy this. And as I said, we're talkers, so there's plenty of conversations that we would love to share about our time with Greg and with you with Greg. So thank you all for coming.
If you wanted to put something on my epitaph, it would be very simply, tried to make my mother proud. That's it. Spent a lifetime doing that. That was it. See, I think when I was like 8 or 9 or something like that, I started to realize that death was a feature of life. I don't know, for some reason, somebody hit me. I told my mom, I said, Mommy, one day you're gonna die. I was young, I was like 8 or 9 or something. And she laughed, it's so funny, she cracked up. She said, yeah, of course I am. She said, I don't want you to die, Mommy. And she said, well, don't worry about that. We got a long, long way to go. And it's true, because she passed at 92. And she said, just make me proud. And I said, okay, Mommy, that I will do. That's it.
The light has returned. Please join us outside for some food. I don't know about you guys, but I could use a little sunshine now. Enjoy, and thank you again.
And so I face the final curtain. My friends, I say clear, I'll state my case, which I am certain I live a life is full. I traveled every highway, more, much more than this. I did my way. Regrets, I had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and sort it through without exemption. I played each charted course, each careful step along the byway. More, much more than this, I needed my way. And there were times, I'm sure you knew, I've been on more than I could chew. But through it all, when there were down, I get it all and spit it out. I face it all, I stood tall, and did it my way. What is man? What has he got? Not himself, he's not. True state of things, he truly feels. Now the words of one who knew. Let the record show I took the blows